Welcome to Reps and Real Talk, the show where performance meets perspective and every set comes with a story. In this episode, myself and co-host Justin Ray will be discussing our journey into strength and conditioning, covering important aspects of what it takes to begin and maintain that journey as a strength and conditioning coach. This episode is jam-packed with real-life examples of what it takes to be an S&C coach, so whether you're an aspiring coach or a veteran in the field, make sure you stick around and listen to the full episode because we've got some real talk coming your way.
What's happening, boss?
Yo, boss, what's going on? It's been a long time in the making. We've been discussing this podcast for a little while, so it's great to finally get it going. So let's tell all the listeners what we got going on in today's episode and with the podcast, Justin.
It's been a long time in the making here. We're going to dive deep in the world of S&C, strength and conditioning, and share our thoughts and experiences, insights on, what we've had going on.
Which brings us to the topic of our first episode, which is going to be talking about our specific journeys and how we transitioned and got into S&C and what we've learned along the way, and give some tips for those that are looking to get into the field as well.
So if you're curious about the strength and conditioning world, we got some really great topics. So stick around to the end because today's show is going to be a banger.
That it is. It's definitely going to be a banger. So Justin, why don't you kick us off with a little bit about your journey and your background so the listeners know who you are and what you're about?
I'm pretty unique in this field, I'd say. So I'm going to give you where I'm currently at and then my prior job before I got here where we met, right? So I'm currently the Associate Director of Sports Performance for men's basketball at LaSalle University. Been here, this is going on, when this new season approaches, will be my 5th year. Prior to LaSalle, I was with the Philadelphia 76ers, specifically because some coaches out there want to know exactly where you were, the Delaware Bluecoats in the G League. And that's where Dr. Craig Whitworth Turner and I met. So prior to that, where I got my education was Temple University for my bachelor's in exercise and sports science. And then I proceeded to get my master's degree online at California University of Pennsylvania, and specifically in performance enhancement and injury prevention. So with that being said, Craig, how about you tell the listeners about yourself?
For sure. So you already mentioned kind of where we connected with the Philadelphia 76ers and the Delaware Bluecoats, which was a great time. You were one of the first people that I had the pleasure of meeting in Philadelphia, and you've been one of my best friends ever since. But a little bit about me. You mentioned the doctor, you dropped the doctorate in there. So Doctor of Exercise Science, did my undergrad, master's, PhD, all in the UK at Liverpool. John Moores, was really interested in sports science at the time and research. And that opened a lot of doors to me, doors that allowed me to come to the US with taking an S&C role at NC State University, which was the role I held prior to the Sixers. Then that's when I moved to Philly. I was fortunate enough to get an NBA role without any basketball experience. A lot of my background was football, soccer for the US listeners out there. And that was where me and you obviously connected on a professional and personal level. And then from there, once my kind of contract was up, ended up being the head of basketball S&C for UPenn, University of Pennsylvania, which some people back home confuse that with Penn State because of the Penn logo, which is always kind of funny to let them know that I'm not in the middle of Pennsylvania. I'm in the city of Philadelphia. And now I'm more in the sports tech world, education, and all that kind of good stuff. So a little transition away from the day-to-day of S&C. But given that this episode is about our journey, Justin, take me back to before I knew you. I know a few of these stories, but the listeners don't. So tell us a little bit about you, how you kind of got into S&C and that kind of journey up until we met.
Yeah, I'm going to take it way back. So my first job was a bartender, barback to be exact. So in that role, you're pretty much making sure that the bartenders have everything they need to continuously make drinks on a rapid pace. Keep in mind, specifically, this is for catering, weddings, parties, etc. And they're pretty large in quantity of people that we've dealt with. So you're always making sure they have glasses, ice, the alcohol is full, ready to go, the beer is ready to go, cold. So things like that, I think, are valuable for us going or getting into the field of strength and conditioning, because I took from that preparation, right? We have to make sure that everything is stocked hours and hours on beforehand before an event starts, similar to us setting up a weight room. I think that the interactions with people. You're a yes man, basically. And it's a terrible thing not a terrible thing, but a weird thing to say, but we still are. You provide a service to our athletes, our coaches. And if you don't, there's going to be some crossroads you're going to have to deal with. So figuring out how to say yes more often, I think, is a positive for any aspiring strength and conditioning coach or professional going up in the field. Learn how to say yes early, because once you get to a certain role later in your life, you'll probably be able to direct and maybe say no once in a while. So for me, the bartender bar back aspect of things was very impactful in my growth. So moving on to why I was interested in being a strength coach. I actually didn't know it was a job. I didn't go right into college. I took a little bit of break, a little bit of time off, trying to figure things out from high school. Became a personal trainer, local gyms, learning how to personal train, got my first certification and things of that nature. And I think that that was a valuable portion of where I wanted. How do you progress this? What's the next step of basically training the general public? What's next? So for me, it was I need to improve my education. I want to go back to school. I finally figured out like this could potentially be an option. So I went to Community College of Philadelphia to start, just to continue taking credits and what have you. And I knew eventually what I wanted to do was become either a strength and conditioning coach or an athletic trainer. I heard about it. So for me, this is the point in time when athletic training at Temple University was moved to a master's. So the next best thing was go into exercise and sports science. And so I'm like, well, what the hell is this? So it was interesting. So I applied for it, got in the program because I took 1,000,000 science courses at community college. So for me, moving on to, I was still personal training while I was in college. And finally got an internship at St. Joe's University under Brian Bingaman. Shout out to Bing for giving me my first opportunity.
Coach
And Ben,
Bing.
who's Coach Bingman, and Ben Steenrod, who's going to be in my wedding as well. So those two guys were super impactful early on, giving me an opportunity. I had no idea about training athletes, what it took, the preparation and the training, the interactions when, the daily was, a learning experience for me. So, I was an intern for Olympic sports to be exact. And I knew the next best sport there was basketball. Like I wanted to be the basketball strength and conditioning coach. I wanted to be on the court. I wanted guys to come to me and ask for questions. I wanted to be the reason why somebody wasn't doing something. So for me, that was valuable, like making an impact on people's lives and having the relationships, because you're going to need, in this day and age, the relationships are everything. If you're not meeting people as you get older, I feel that you're not really growing, because when you just continue to meet new people here and there and you expand, there's new ideas, there's new job opportunities. So not to get off topic, but St. Joe's was a viable part. And then I went to University of Miami football for a summer and came back to Temple to finish up my degree. And then I interned with the Flyers for about a month, early 18 and into 19. And then Bing actually told me to reach out to Adam Petway when he was an assistant with the Philadelphia 76ers at the time. So I don't know this guy. So I just keep shooting him emails, sent my resume, and I heard that there was an internship open. So I just kept sending him emails like months on end, like once a month, just consistently persistent, respectfully, right? So I finally get an email back from them, and they were like, would you be able to come in on this day to interview and meet Todd Wright? So I meet Todd Wright, have an interview, nervous as hell in a suit. This is like post-practice for them. Watched practice for about a half hour, met Todd Wright, met Adam, met Tador, and nothing came from it. I didn't hear anything for about 6 months. So I'm still working personal training, interning, what have you. Then I get a call from Adam. Could you come up today, whatever that day was, but I know it was during the week. I skipped class and said, absolutely. I drove home, got a suit on, and met Adam, Tador, and Lorena. From that point on, that was my first job. Moving forward, got to work with you, got that NBA experience, G League experience, and you don't realize the pool that you're in, because working in the best basketball league in the world is you have access to so much. And I felt like I knew zero to everybody that was there with me. So I think for me, that was, you're going to grow regardless. You're forced to. And if you're not going to work in the space for very long. But then here comes COVID. And then COVID I had to make a choice, right? Choice was made for me, but the league wasn't anywhere in sight. Unfortunately, sometimes you get laid off in those situations, but that was a positive for me. That's when I grew into I went to, I'm gonna stay in school. I'm gonna go for my master's. Went for my master's. Dorenco was awesome. I was ahead of the curve there. Then here comes LaSalle. That job opened up, and I applied for that, get the job, and I've been there ever since. So for me, basketball, whatever my fate is moving forward, the people I've met around along the lines, if you just continue to work hard and you're persistent and you're good to people and you genuinely stay in touch with people, I think opportunities will all come to you instead of always searching for the next best move, because it's hard to be present and doing that at the same time. So it's always good to look and network, but for me, I knew I could rely on certain people because just the way I was genuine, how I was genuinely to them, they were back to me in a short period of time. And I knew in that space, these professionals are, they see a lot of junk, right? So, and they know how to differentiate good people and people that have intentions on certain things. So for me, being where I am now I'm very grateful. It's my third head coach. I know I'm bouncing around a bit, but it's just the way it is. So you never know what like life's going to bring you moving forward. And with that being said, Craig, I know I spent a little bit of time here, but let's tell everybody about your journey a little bit.
Well, the one thing you missed out on that journey is how you're the G League James Harden, because the step back three lefty in the little staff games that we used to play was a lethal weapon. So there's a little bit of Justin Ray trivia on that one that you did miss out.
That year
Too
I got
humble.
better, man. I got better that year.
But yeah, I mean, kind of similar in a sense when we go like all the way back. Like my first job actually was an interesting experience because it was on the bread line. So think about like a bakery factory and what's going on behind and how like bread gets packaged and things like that. And my supervisor was the only person on that team who actually spoke English. So it was a lesson at 16 years old of how to communicate with other people without actually them being able to speak your language, which we
Right.
know is important once you get into the coaching skills and S&C later on in terms of demonstration and stuff like that and making things understandable for people who might not speak your strength and conditioning type language. But at 16 years old, I wasn't thinking about that right there and then, was I? I was just like trying to learn and adapt to the environment. The bread line was fun. We got free bread at the end of every shift, so it was always nice to go home with a fresh loaf. But then, kind of similar thing, I had various different jobs. The drinking age is 18 in the UK, so I was able to work a bar job fairly early in my career as a server, which you mentioned is like one of those communication, being organized, making sure everything is in the right kind of order and communicating with the customers, making sure you're getting their order checked off, which relate that to the S&C world. That's for me, working with your customers is your athletes and coaches, right? And then from there, going to college, like, well, finished high school, we have a thing in the UK that we call college, which is the years 16 to 18 years old, where you're not in university, you're in like a kind of like community college, public college, or a sixth form. And I just went and did like a sport degree, sports certification, kind of similar to yourself. Like, it wasn't really called S&C as I remember it. It was like fitness coach was kind of like the term for these roles in football and soccer in the UK. And then from there, it was kind of like, what do you go and do? And one of my advisors, and actually it was one of my advisors in high school who originally put this sport, was like, have you ever heard of like sports science? Like you've got a scientific mind, you're very logical thinking. Have you heard of sports science? I'm like, I have no idea what sports science is. I want to like play sport. I don't want to learn about the science of sport. But anyway, found this degree, science and football, had football in the name. It was in Liverpool. And I thought, okay, it's fairly close to home. It's got a good reputation as a university in sports science. Let's go and do that. And from there, I never looked back. Like, I really got interested in the exercise physiology, muscle metabolism, and that's where like it kind of then fell into this fitness coach S&C type role. And then I got an opportunity during my master's applications. I was applying for different master's programs, and I got a master's in philosophy that ended up rolling into my PhD, which was in collaboration with Nike, where essentially I spent my time as an applied researcher. So I was embedded in a football academy, soccer academy, and we were aiming to get them pro contracts. But at the same time, I was doing research and actually implementing kind of sports science data and monitoring processes whilst also coaching and whilst also trying to learn all this tech because I was 21 years old, had literally no idea. And technically, this was my first ever proper full time role in sport that wasn't kind of like an internship or kind of like an assistant type role. And we were head of sports science, whatever that meant. So that again kind of embedded me into this world of like, you've got to adapt and survive, right? Like, you've got to learn what the coach wants. And I've got 100 stories that I could tell about my first year in that. And we'll probably get into some of those later in this episode. But that really like shaped me early on in terms of my direction. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I got then that opportunity to move over to the US because of my Nike connections. And that was what kind of led me through that journey to then us being able to collaborate and work at the Sixers together and spend a lot of time on a day-to-day basis. And COVID, as you mentioned, was kind of a crazy year because that was like unknown to all of us, right? So no matter all of our experiences leading up to that point, like COVID threw this like new challenge where we were driving vans to drop equipment off at people's houses, where we were dropping off food like a Deliveroo type driver, you know what I mean? Like we were doing Uber Eats, stuff like that. And like people don't necessarily always see those challenges, right? In S&C, especially at the highest level of the pros, they just see that you get to work with pros and you're on TV and these guys are getting paid millions of dollars and it's luxury, but they don't understand those challenging aspects sometimes. And that's where we grew as a friendship as well as being colleagues because of those moments, having to spend more time together, friggin' in masks, disinfecting, testing every day, and all that kind of good stuff. So COVID definitely shaped the environment that we ended up in with that. But as that's kind of our background there, and we've covered that off, I think, and hopefully the listeners would get a good idea and a sense of where we've like come from. Let's start about talking about like getting into the field of what people need. So like a little bit of kind of mentorship segment here in terms of what do we think is important for somebody getting their foot in the door like we did way, way back when. So kicking things off, let me ask you about this because you kind of mentioned a couple of internships that you had with Miami, the Flyers and stuff like that. You volunteered, you were doing personal training. Talk me through that process. Like, what do you think is the importance of those like internships and getting your foot in the door kind of thing?
Yeah, I think early on, I think it's best if you're willing to do something for free for a short period of time. You got to be really dedicated to it. And if you're able to do, it's not for free, right? Financially, it is. But if you're willing to get free education, free relationship building, right? I think you're going to set yourself up and anything you do. I know this podcast is about strength and conditioning, about us too, sports science, but I think if you're willing to learn from somebody and you're going to put yourself in a place where you can learn for free, well, nobody's going to fault you for that. No matter how old you are, no matter how young you're going to, or at least give yourself a chance, that chance to be pretty successful. Right. And then once you land that first internship, I would say go with a sport that you think you have interest in. It doesn't have to be basketball, it doesn't have to be football. But if you go into any other sport besides those, you're going to learn other sports secondhandly because it's inevitable. You're going to learn what other sports do because that's what Olympic strength and conditioning coaches do. They have multiple teams. It's a tough job, and you're going to learn a lot about yourself and how you can coach and how your programs differentiate and how different coaches speak with you. And I think it's always be attentive, always be interested, no matter if you're not. But if that's your job, stick to the plan, right? So getting your foot in, you're going to have to, at some point, somebody's going to give you an opportunity. If you're willing to do something for free of finances for a short period of time. So figure out who you have to get in touch with to give you that first opportunity. And then I think logos do matter to a certain extent. So after that first opportunity, that you're going to need maybe 1 to 3 internships before you get to really where you want to be in strength and conditioning, so to speak. And maybe if you're a grad assistant, I didn't go that way. I've rather paid for my own and then maybe got a job. Doesn't always, it's different for everybody. But I felt I had enough with the volunteering and doing all these other sports. I just wanted to contribute and work. But it's hard to do that if that opportunity doesn't arise. But I do think that you have to be really persistent. You got to be open-minded, willing to say yes, and be willing to ask questions at the right time. You have to have a good feel. So what do I mean by feel? When to ask a question. You can't ask a question specifically to programming during 7 a.m. second group lift for a football team. Like, it's just not going to happen. It's the wrong timing. So timing is everything. So understanding those things, certifications, the NSCA, NASM. We don't have any affiliations with either one of them, but they are the affiliations that help keep this profession what it is.
Hmm.
And then you're going to have to do the dirty work too while you're in these roles. You're going to have to clean weights. You're going to have to set up the cones for agility drills. You're going to have to wipe the weight room down. There's a lot of cleaning involved in this. So get used to it, at least in your first year.
Getting
I
your
feel like
hands
I'm,
dirty.
that's it. Just getting the hands dirty. So from there, Craig, do you have anything that I may have missed?
Well, no, I think you touched on a lot of good stuff. The getting your hands dirty aspect is kind of funny, and I do have like one little story. I won't name the environment where I was at, but we had a internship coordinator who basically didn't want the interns to clean. It was like had to be put on the full-time members of staff because of it being seen as labor, right? And that I think is kind of like I understand it. And we mentioned, and you mentioned, sorry, at the start there about being willing to get experience for free, right? And so there's kind of like this murky gray area, I think, with internships because like we don't want to overuse an intern and like use them in roles that they would then be seen as an employee, right? But at the same time, like they have to get experience and you can't get experience without doing. So this kind of like mantra of like all internships should be paid. I think Power Five schools probably can afford to pay their interns, GA positions, whatever it is, right? Like, but the lower down you get, that budget is like kind of tough. There might be like some hourly salary that you can allocate to something like that. But again, it's all about getting the experience. So, like you said, like you've got to be willing to sacrifice something. And so for me, circling back to that, like the being used as labor, well, every S&C coach has had to experience cleaning the weight room at some point in their career, right? So you're setting them up for, hey, this is how organization works. And then think about COVID, right? Like how many people were spraying their barbells down consistently before COVID? And now a pandemic hits, and I'm pretty sure people will clean their weight rooms a lot more now. There's the wipes are more around, the spray bottles are more around, the things like that. Whereas I bet before people did it at the end of the week, they didn't do it every day kind of thing, you know, and depends on the environment. But the only other thing that I would kind of like mention about like people getting their foot into the door, and you sort of alluded to this, was like reaching out to the right people. Like I feel like sometimes people think that it's a volume thing. You just got to like reach out to every single school and hopefully one hits. But reaching out to the right programs with the right intentions, like why do you want to go and do an internship at U of Miami, right? Is that environment a really good one? Is it not? Do they have opportunities? Do they have a good coaching tree? And what you find is eventually there's going to be somebody who knows someone and you end up getting an internship. So I didn't do well. I technically did do an internship. It was kind of more of a work experience, we called it. So internship, work experience, same thing. And I had to drive an hour to get to this football stadium, this soccer stadium, an hour back in the same day just to run an hour session. And a lot of times I wasn't even supervised. And so it's like that for me was free labor, right? Like I wasn't learning anything, but I was getting my hands dirty, coaching athletes, learning how to interact with them. So I was fine with it. I'm not asking somebody to get paid, but that led to my first ever paid role. And so, like you said, you can get that one hit, do your internship, boom, you get a role. But it all depends on the experiences, what you pull out of that internship is the reason why you'll get a role, because you'll sound a little bit more confident when you're interviewing and things like that. Actually, let's just talk about certifications real quick as well. I do have one like point about that is obviously you need like your CSCS. You can go and get other certifications as well. Like minimum is CSCS for strength conditioning. But the one thing that I would say is like I obviously went and got a PhD, right? You have your masters. Masters has become kind of the minimal standard these days to get a role. Not to say that you can't get a role with just a bachelor's, but masters is typically the gold standard now. But then people like see me and they go, "Well, you got a PhD, like you must be amazing, right? Like you'll get any role you want." But the PhD as a piece of paper is one thing, but the process and the journey was the thing that really taught me. So with any certification, you doing your master's, sure, it's checking the box to make sure you get past the resume stage of an interview screening process. But if you don't get anything from that program, then it's pointless, right? So the whole point of doing a certification, doing a degree, you should get stuff out of it and it should like set you up well. So when you're thinking about doing this certification or course, think about the whys are you doing it? Are you doing it just because it's popular or are you doing it because you're going to become a better coach out of it? That's kind of my thought process about that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. I do think later as I get in my career that, and especially AI being involved in a lot of things now, is that education, certifications, they are just some people will be a little controversial on this, but they are just pieces of papers. I think if you want to learn something, your experiences are going to show that, right? If you want to be in a place with finance, you'll figure out how to do that if you want to do that. I get that there has to be a standard, right? So not anyone and everyone can, but realistically speaking, like you probably could if you really want to do it. Like if you wanted to go in finance right now, it just takes time, right? Time is money, and you're just going to have to risk for some rewards. So I do think that sometimes we overanalyze that this person has this certification and this degree. I more respect the degree process more than the certifications. To be honest, it's like we already learned this information, but now I have to just solidify and pay another fee that I have to go and spend on for this. And I get it. I do. I value certifications, but sometimes to a certain extent, it's a little, everyone has a certification now.
Yeah. One thing I'd say on that as well is like it builds your foundational knowledge. And I feel when I've worked with younger coaches and that I've most recently worked with and I've acted as a mentor for, they kind of want the fast answers, right? They want the fast track. They want to just go and get CSCS, and that makes them a strength conditioning coach. And it's like, well, have you read an exercise physiology textbook? Have you read a biomechanics textbook? Have you read a research paper? Do you know what I mean? If you haven't done those things, you're still not truly an S&C coach. And the same goes for sports science now as well. There's the certification in sports science, right? And I think a few people have done videos and things like that on like what sports science is and wrote research papers on it and articles and stuff. But just go and getting that certification, does that mean I'm not a sports scientist because I don't have that certification? I don't think so, right? Like I've got a PhD in exercise science, but someone else could go get that certification and would get entry to a job because the requirements are to have the CPSS, right? And so I can't apply for that job, but I've probably got 10 years of experience on that person. So I find it kind of like ironic in a sense with the certifications. They're like bonuses for me, like check the box bonuses, but the right course will get you a lot of information. Stuff that's just a regurgitation of what you already learned in school. You might as well have gone and done your master's program. Do you know what I mean? And just ask the
Absolutely.
professors and stuff like that. But
So, one question I have for you that may be helpful for the listeners: when we find that person that you need to reach out to, like when you're an up and coming strength and conditioning coach, how do you find the right person to reach out to? Is it somebody that's in your area that you may have heard of? Is it one that successful basketball team, the college that they have? Where do you think like somebody like your old self? What would you tell your kids? How would we move forward in that process?
that's a really good question, right? And I don't know if I have the best answer because geography will play a little bit of a part of it, right? Like if I think the best ever S&C coach lives in California, I got to find a flight and get over to California to meet that person. But if I'm in Florida and there's somebody around here that I can go and talk to, or back home in Manchester, England, right? Like then I'm looking for those people first. But what I would say is like because now there's social media and the online presence, I would look at the ones that you think are the most authentic and put out the best like relatable content and reach out to them first because they might know somebody who knows somebody. And so like a good example of somebody who's a mutual person who we've both met who I think is like very valuable from a networking perspective is like someone like Jesse Wright, right? So we obviously were lucky enough to meet him whilst working with the Sixers. So I didn't meet him through social media or a cold reach out. So it was more of a warm introduction. But somebody like that, I don't think that younger coaches would look at Jesse's profile potentially. I might be wrong because he's running a mentorship program and doing a great job with it. But I don't think they would look at Jesse and be like, he's the guy I need to reach out to on social media. It'd be somebody else who's winning championships, you know what I mean? Like somebody who's in the top tier, best ever club. But Jesse's gone and lived it. He's been there. Did a whole 20-year plus career in the NBA as a coach. So he's like an example of somebody like a name that people wouldn't know. But then there are also like other random people, which with me, like when I think about networking, like I was never one for just firing off emails to every single person in the world kind of thing. I would only really contact people that I thought were interesting. So that would be kind of my thought process. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think that finding out, I mean, social media is just, it is what it is at this point, right? So it's kind of inevitable, but you can actually find out who the strength conditioning coaches are. So if somebody was like, I'll re-ask that question, right? So I would say if you're living in a certain area, look at the closest colleges. How successful are those? That could be a helpful thing. Not that where I am, I haven't been that successful in my winning and losses career, but I'm still in a certain role, right? And I'd be happy to reach out for anybody else. But so I would say, what's closest to me? if I'm that person trying to get in strength and conditioning? What's closest to me? Which colleges are closest where I could still potentially work maybe? So your area, and then social media presence. If somebody has a pretty good following that that person is interested in, don't be afraid to send a message. But the message can't be a text type thread message, right? It's the type of message. It shouldn't be really long. It doesn't, that person doesn't need a story about you. It could be just basically, what do you want upfront, but very respectful in the same context, right?
For sure. I'd 100% agree with that. The amount of times I've been contacted on like say a Instagram or LinkedIn where like somebody like, "Hey mate, how's it going? I want to learn how to get over from the UK to the USA in sport." And like you say, it's like text talk. I'm kind of informal, so sometimes I give people a pass. But at the same time, if they tried that with somebody else, like the professionalism that isn't there kind of thing, and especially if it's like a slightly older coach with more experience, they're going to demand that level of respect and professionalism, right? So I always find it funny. And again, the other thing that I think is important just to add on that comment is just make sure the person you're contacting, you've done a little bit of background research on them. So like, it's not that I'm a big timer by any means, but it's a pet peeve of mine where like somebody will write like Mr. Turner, right? And it's like, well, it says PhD in my profile, so probably just say Dear Craig or Hello Craig, instead of going Hello Mr. Turner, because I'm going to be like, call you on the, well, it's Dr. Turner. I didn't do a PhD process to get called Mr. all the time. But again, I joke about that stuff. I don't care about if somebody
Mm-hmm.
calls me Doctor, Mr., Sir, Master, whatever. Right? But yeah, I think that kind of formality of what you said, like it's not a text conversation unless you've been introduced by somebody else that gives you that opportunity to then be informal. So it's always think professionalism first. And I think, again, I'm not shitting on yoga coaches, but I think because of the way social media is and things like that, like we've lost a little bit of that professionalism on engagement because you can just text somebody on Instagram DMs now. You can reach out through a social media platform like Twitter, X, whatever it's called these days, right?
No, absolutely. I'm going to piggyback off of that too, because it's like, just think of it as an email. Email is the next, nobody's really writing professional letters at this point anymore to a certain extent. So email is the next most professional organic piece where you can kind of reach out to somebody respectfully. So I always say, if this email is written respectfully and clear, I should copy that to the social media platform, whatever one you're going to use, right? So, for example, Instagram, that heading, right? Engage in the person who you're speaking with. Your grammar should be proper, right? Full sentences, words, correct information, right? Like you can't just be like you're texted your best friend.
For sure.
And it creates good habits anyway, right? Keep spell check on your iPhone. Simple thing, because you'll send actual sentences to these people. So I think keeping good habits that way.
The other thing I would say as well, if you do copy and paste your message, make sure you change the person's name. Like how many times I've done this, I've been guilty of this in the past, where I've fired off a message because it's copy and paste, and I forgot to send "Hey Justin," and instead it says "Hey Jonathan," and it's like, oh, I've already fucked up that one. You might as well throw that in the trash, right? Like, so
Absolutely. And if
make sure you
somebody's
proofread before you press send. Now there is like the undo send button these days, but you got to proofread, right?
it only goes so far. And one more thing, and I'll get off of this, is that you have this really good message. If you want to go over the top, have a really nice written one-page resume and maybe even a potential cover letter. If the cover letter is just addressing that you want to be a volunteer in that program, it's just fine. People aren't looking for, we know who you are. So if you're going to send your resume and your cover letter, we know that you're not going to have 12 years experience. Your position is what it is at this point. So if you're going to be all the way up to the curve, respectful email, short and sweet, tell them what you want, be direct and respectful, have the resume nice, get it proofreaded. There's a million things online that you can kind of gauge off of. So do your, again, time and research, make sure it looks well. And the same thing with, tell them basically what you want in a more formal context in your cover letter. If you have all those in one PDF document, you can copy and paste that into the same social media thread, I think, at this point, right? I know Instagram will let you
Yeah,
copy and
for
paste
sure.
that stuff into there. So you'll have a better opportunity of engagement with a professional, knowing that you went through those steps to, and it's the same for us. You can't just reach out to people. I still won't get responses if I say, "Hey, what's up, bro?" Like, that's not going to work.
100%. Yeah, and it's good that you mentioned about cover letters and things like that because applying for a job in an S&C is going to be a topic of one of our future episodes. So make sure if you are listening to this and you've got this far, that you watch or listen the next episode or one of the future episodes. It might not be the exact next one that we do because we'll be walking through that process and going in a little bit more depth in terms of the cover letter and application process and what you really need to stand out during that job process because we've both had very interesting experiences, I think, from different levels of doing that sort of stuff. But let's move on. So we got a little segment here where we mentioned about like the networking side of things, and obviously you just mentioned about like reaching out to people and stuff like that. But what is one of the most important soft skills that a coach needs, in your opinion?
That's a tough one. Confidence. I'd say that's the main soft skill. Know what you want and you'll be given what you want. So confidence is key. If you're confident, you've done your research already. You know what you want, in my personal opinion. So I would say the number one thing, we'll keep it short, confidence.
Of it.
And
I'm gonna
yours?
go with I'm gonna go with humility because one thing that annoys me more than anything with younger coaches is the know-it-alls who think that they know it all and they've not really had much experience at all. So don't try and like impress somebody with everything that you know straight away, if you know what I mean. Ask them the questions first, get answers from them, and then if you do know more, then share and everything else like that. But also realize that who you're talking to in the room that you're in, you're probably going to be one of the more lesser experienced people, should I say, not more, in terms of knowledge in that topic. So that would be kind of the one that I would say is on top of that. Confidence is also being humble and having humility and realizing when and when not to kind of talk and demonstrate your knowledge. Next one that we've got is a little bit more personal to you. What do you know now that you wish you knew when you first started?
That's a tough one, man. It's really tough.
I mean, it's definitely a hard one. The one thing that I would say that I know now that I wish I knew when I was started is to not overemphasize the perfect program, right? Spending hours and hours of the day trying to figure out like the perfect programming block, the perfect microcycle, the perfect periodization and stuff like that. Because nothing in strength and conditioning sport is ever perfect. You know, I know, head coach changes the plan, athlete gets hurt, game loss, we're in at practice the next day, game win, we get 2 days off. You know, like it's forever changing, so you have to be adaptable. So having good knowledge and foundational knowledge and having programs is definitely important. But chasing the best program, the perfect program, there's no such thing as a perfect program. So one thing I often preach about is many roads lead to Rome. Some just get you there faster, right? So having programs that are better than others, having some that are just in the back pocket where you can just pull it out. It's a game day lift. For example, you didn't have anything planned, but in the back of your mind, you've got these game day lift type programs. So, not trying to chase the perfect program because I think young coaches will spend hours and hours, and I was one of those coaches programming where I should have been learning and absorbing, right? And figuring out stuff rather than trying to make sure my program looks pretty and it has the best exercise order and stuff like that. Because one thing I will say is if you change the exercise order and you did your program back to front the next time you write a S&C session, probably still get you to the same destination at some point. You know what I mean? So with
Absolutely.
that in
There is no
mind,
perfect program.
not at all, not at all. What have you got for us?
Man, that's tough. I'm going to piggyback off of you, just the adaptability piece that when you're in that specific realm, and I'm going to speak from my side, when you get up to a little, when you have more responsibility and not so much as an intern anymore, but the daily adaptability that the training programs are not as prominent to what you're doing as far as the coordinating and having meals being delivered on time. Who's picking the meal up? Where are you going? What's in the area? What time are you leaving? It's more of understanding the schedule, understanding from when you wake up to when you can lay your head down is what's most important on that time clock for you. So understanding how to adjust to your schedule.
Yeah, I want to add to that actually because you just made something idea spark in my mind there. With the other thing about that is when you're getting into strength conditioning, right? Like your aspirations is to get the best job. And one thing that I think people forget about, they have their eyes on that target, which is great, but they forget about getting there, that approach, doing the grind, putting in the reps, right? And so like everybody wants to be the highest paid strength conditioning coach in the world. But the thing is, you're not going to get that job as job number one. Probably won't get that job number two, three, four, and five, maybe six, seven, right? It might be down the road. So realizing that like you're not the shit when you first start is also kind of going back to that humility thing, but it's kind of the point that I want to make there is that get your reps in, get your work, grind hard, and then you'll get the respect. You'll get acknowledged for who you are based on application, not because I just got a degree and I deserve to be paid six figures, right? Like everybody thinks they're deserving to be paid six figures, but generally speaking, not many people want to actually put in the work that's worth six figures. All right, here's a good one. Mistakes to avoid in year one. What's the biggest mistake that you made? Let's give it a little bit of an experience and how to avoid that.
Know your exercise selection if you have a group of athletes coming in. The flow of the room matters more than you actually think. As far as if you have 20 people in that room and then there's another team with a few people coming in because their class schedule, speaking from a college standpoint, I always think the flow of the room and exercise selection will help your program succeed. And you don't want to have people doing things that if you have a two-floor gym and you're having sprints going on upstairs and you're having people bench press in the weight room. You got to make sure that it's cohesive, close, right? And making sure that the session is moving and the athletes, everybody's constantly, there's a flow to the people executing the exercises being done. All right. So the
For
flow,
sure.
what is that? Right. So if you have six athletes and you have bench press, med ball throw, and pull up, those three, those first three athletes, or say two, right? We'll go 2, 4, and 6. The first two, one's a spotter, one's actually doing the exercise, so to speak. So there's a rest period in between, and there's a safety net if something goes south. So the flow would be bench press, med ball throw, and pull up, right? So each group, A, B, and C, can start on a different exercise. Again, everything leads to Rome. So if you start with pull up, yeah, it might affect your bench a little bit, but in the aspect, you still have to get it done. So there you go.
The other thing that I would say is like with that, right? Like is using the superset, like the power of creating flow from superset and exercises. Because just as a personal experience, I'm like training in a public gym right now, and like you can't superset exercises very well if it's like different bits of equipment because you're hogging two machines, you're hogging dumbbells on the cable. Like it's disrespectful for other members. But in a performance setting, supersets are so powerful because you can have one athlete benching while the other athlete is doing pull-ups in that superset and then have a more
Exactly.
explosive movement with a med ball throw. And then there's baked in organic rest. So yeah, definitely the flow of a session is something that I think people make mistakes on early on because they want bench and I don't know, let's put bench and squat in the same program at the same time. But like if you're using the rack for bench, how are you going to be able to squat kind of thing if you don't have like a dual rack?
Exactly. For the coaches out there, you're on a time frame. There's a specific time where that athlete has to be in the weight room and out of the weight room. So again, that's where the flow and what you need to and actually you don't have to do everything in one session. It's my little
Yeah,
tidbit.
absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that as well. Like, don't over condense a session as well with 1,000 exercises just because you feel like you have to touch every body part, every muscle, and all that kind of thing. Because, like, actually, you don't need that. Like, when you think about session formats, you'll get another opportunity. They might come a little bit less in terms of like frequency in season. Like with basketball, we both know, right? Like, sometimes you're having to do post game lifts, sometimes you don't get a lift in for 7 days because of travel and shitty hotel rooms and all that stuff. Again, realizing that you'll get opportunities further down the line as well to get those other programming elements in and being creative with that. I'll give you my mistake to avoid because I did this in my early career. I think I've told this story before where it's kind of like knowing your role but also making sure that you over communicate to the people who are in charge. So the head coach, GM, whoever it is, right? Like the person who at the end of the day has the kind of say in terms of your survival and future. And one of those things that goes hand in hand with that is making sure that you're on time and that you're prompt. So a quick story from me. Like I won't go into full details, but one day my alarm doesn't go off. I'm 2 hours away from a driving perspective to where I need to be to work that day because I was at home visiting. Alarm doesn't go off, and I'm going to be late for practice, right? So I call my colleague. I'm like, hey, make sure all like the GPS, all the pre-screening stuff we've got done, the report gets sent to our head coach. Make sure you do all that. He's like, boom, I got it. So anyway, I drive. I'm freaking get to practice. I think it's an hour into practice, and they actually did a shorter practice, so practice is about to finish as I get there. And go up, all the boys are like, "Oh, where have you been?" Blah, blah, blah. Like they're going crazy, and like head coach is stood on the hill, right? Didn't say a word to me, doesn't say anything. An hour later, I get asked to come to his office. And it's like, what happened? And I was like, oh, like, really sorry I'm late. Got stuck in traffic. I let Thorpe know. And he did all the stuff that I needed to do this morning. So everything got covered. And he's like, yeah, but you fucked up. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. But I'm here now, whatever. And he was like, that's it. You're like done with me. And I'm like, didn't understand what that meant. I'm like, oh, fuck, I'm about to get fired. He didn't fire me. But what he taught me a lesson in, to get to the end of the story, in a sense, is that, like, I didn't let him know that I was going to be late. I let somebody else know to tell him to let them know, if you know what I mean. And Thorpe, just being him, he got busy, he did his thing, and didn't have to tell the manager, right? He's not my personal assistant. So the moral of that story is, like, over communicate to the people who are like the main key stakeholders. So if you are late, hold your hand up. Hey, I fucked up. I'm about to be late. But let the person know who's in charge. Do you know what I mean? Because if you don't do that, then they're gonna think that, one, you don't respect them, or two, you haven't got enough time. Or in my case, it was, I was honestly a little bit scared to tell him. It was my first fuck up kind of thing. But that was, in his book, it was one and done. Like, you only got one chance, one opportunity, right? So, like, I spent a whole season then trying to gain that trust back, and it took a couple of years, if I'm being honest. But yeah, the moral of that story is, like, if you do fuck up, when you fuck up, because as much as it's a fuck up, people will respect you more for calling the person, saying you're going to be late, or hey, I did this wrong, this fucked up, rather than trying to hide and make excuses and things like that.
So
So that's my little.
my piggyback to that in one little sentence there. It's always on you. If you think that way, that it's always on you, you won't go wrong.
For sure. So last one, this is kind of more like a yes no type question, in a sense, in terms of pick one or the other. Which do you think's more important, knowing your stuff or being a good person when it comes to getting, like, hired and jobs in strength and condition?
Both.
Because obviously both are important, but if you had to pick one starting out, which one do you think would be more important?
Good person, because I always think you can learn.
For sure. I'd agree with that. Because, like, I think there are a few people who are good people who probably need to keep learning, if that makes sense. Like, don't give up on the learning part once you're in. But being a good person is going to get you more chances. And you can always figure out some stuff. Because I don't think anybody's the finished article. We're always learning constantly.
No. And nobody wants to work with a bad person, because in this strength and conditioning field, you're most likely working with a team unless you're a private sector. But in this specific topic, as a team, you got to be a good teammate, right? Nobody's going to want to work with a stubborn, difficult person every single day. Just doesn't work.
For sure. So I think we'll wrap it up there. I think that was a good first little episode intro, talking about some of our background, talking about the reps that we've got in, right? And obviously keeping it real. So one thing that I would say is, just to sign off, is whether you're just like starting out as a S&C coach, or you're a veteran S&C coach who's listening to this, we hope that the story helps inspire. And obviously, if you are a new coach getting into the field, hopefully you can take some of the information that we've used. But if you're already an established coach, pay it forward to these younger coaches, right? Like, maybe your experiences, you can share them with the person and share your journey. So, Justin, take us home.
Show us some love, subscribe, leave a review, share it with a coach or athlete who needs to hear it. We'll be talking to you guys soon. Reps and real talk, baby.
Love it. So just real quick, next week we're going to be cutting through some of the noise in S&C, focusing on what really matters, trying to level up as a coach. So make sure you don't miss that one. And from there, we'll see you on the next one.
Peace.
Peace.